Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation on Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sara Jane. I'm joined by my co-host, Scott Holmes. Hi, Scott.
Good day.
And by our guest, Laurie Morin. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We were meant to have Kate Babbington with us. Sadly, she has been unable to join us. So the three of us, I'm sure, are going to have a wonderful conversation in part of our series, Selfish or Harder to Manipulate, as we are all authors within the book, I Didn't Become Selfish, I Became Harder to Manipulate. And now, Laurie, let's start with you. Well, we are going to start with you anyway. Just share a little about yourself and why you chose to actually be part of this, the book.
Absolutely. Well, I am a retired lawyer. I retired 5 years ago, and I shifted to writing full time, which I absolutely love doing. And I also coach people in writing their memoirs. And I love participating in collaborative books because I love getting all the different perspectives and just being a part of a group that is like-minded writers. There's nothing like that feeling. This particular book, the title just spoke to me because I feel like, you know, we all have been manipulated. A lot of us are being manipulated right now by what's going on in the world. But I also think we all have the capacity to manipulate others, sometimes without even knowing it. It's not in our awareness that we're even doing it because it's taught to us. These lessons are handed down to us. So I really wanted to be a part of trying to parse through that and come up with some ideas about how to break through.
Bless you. Thank you. Now I'm going to hand to you, Scott.
Well, thank you very much, Miss Sara. So, Laurie, one of my favorite people in the whole world. I want everyone to know this. She is absolutely wonderful.
Thanks.
So what your subject today is about change and changing through writing. Yes. I know my own experience. It was cataclysmic what it did for me. Mm-hmm. When I first started writing, I had written about the loss of my wife and daughter, and it allowed me to tell the story and share my story, where before I could not even tell anybody anything about it. I could not say, I couldn't form the words. The emotions would just override everything. And so that process of sharing the story, and we talk about 3,000 words in a collaborative mm-hmm. story, right? It was painstaking. It was, every word was important. And for me, it changed the way my narrative, it's changed the way how I speak about it. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about change, how do you see writing, change through writing?
Yeah. I mean, first, Scott, you know, your experience with that, I read your chapter and it was transformative. It kind of changed the way I looked at that kind of loss and grief. And
oh, thank you.
Yes, it was a beautiful chapter. And I've had the same experience. My chapter in the book is about my mother as a manipulator, and she was not doing it because she's evil. She was doing it because it was her only source of power, or she believed it was her only source of power. So when I wrote that particular chapter, and every time I write something, the first thing that happens is I try to see it from the other person's perspective. And when you do that, it changes the way you view the relationship and the events, because you're not so focused on how you felt. You are developing understanding and compassion for how the other person felt. What's interesting is I just had a body code session last week where I was working on some health issues, but one of the things that came up was some ancestral trauma from 17 generations of women in my family. And it was about powerlessness and despair. So I understand that these things didn't just start with my mother. You know, they started with her mother and her grandmother and her great-grandmother, and they go all the way back. And we inherit them, but we don't have to be stuck in them. And, you know, that's what I think writing does for you. As you write, your perspective changes, you go through a healing process, you move on to forgiveness, and eventually you develop compassion for the way other people act and the other, you know, the feelings that you have about them. So writing for me is always transformational. No matter what the issue is, I always go through that process.
Do you know, I love that. It's because not even necessarily with the writing, but I know with a lot of people find it very cathartic. And I've heard others say from writing the book how much it's changed their lives, actually writing their own story. But it's something my youngest sister has been doing, our family tree. But even with my own story, aspects of this are not in this particular book, but what happened to me as a baby. How do you explain to a 1-year-old that they're in hospital? The rules are your parents can only come every other day. The reality is they can only get to you once a week. You cannot explain that. And even to children as they get older, we are all at a different age when we suddenly understand circumstances outside of people's control, which is exactly what happened for me. And an uncaring sort of, because they just didn't realize the emotional and mental and traumatic damage that they did to children by separating them from their parents at a time they needed them most.
Right.
But as an adult, if we learn to ask the questions about, can we find out more of the circumstances surrounding things, it can help us to heal. And yeah, sort of since then, my mother has sort of, it was only fairly recently, she said, I would go into the hospital, I'd pick you up and I'd just keep cuddling you and I'd just keep saying, I love you, I love you, I love you.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
And then she'd get up and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Was it beautiful? Because something I've learned more recently about myself is my lack of trust of that word love, because of the perceived rejection and abandonment that went with it. But this is what writing our stories, exploring our stories can support us with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
More about ourselves and why we are the way we are.
Right. No, I totally agree. And, you know, it's funny you mentioned the hospital. I had a similar experience growing up. I was 8 years old and I had to have my tonsils out. And nobody even told, my brother and I both went in the hospital at the same time. Nobody told us what was going to happen, how it was going to happen, how long we were going to be there. And they wheeled us in. They, at that time, didn't let parents even go into the room with you. And we're in the operating room and this doctor comes by with this big mask. They used gas at the time, a big gas mask. And I was terrified. I thought I was dying. They said, count backwards from 10. I was like, okay, that's it. And I had nightmares about it for years after that. And it's like you said, you know, my parents didn't have any control over that. I guess they could have tried to communicate a little bit better, but they probably didn't even know what was going to happen. And so as a child, you feel like you're being abandoned, but you're not really. And the process of writing out that story, which I did quite a long time ago, actually helped me see it from a different perspective and to understand. It's where a lot of my fear and anxiety comes from. I still hate being in enclosed spaces, and especially with something over my face, but at least now I understand where it comes from. And, you know, I have many mother stories. After years of writing about them, I was able to come out with a little book, just a little, I didn't sell it, a book I gave away called The Mom Stories, where I was viewing everything through her eyes, and I was able to tell her story. And I was able to translate the things that happened with me from her perspective. And that was such a healing process. You know, I think so many of us walk around with wounds that we carry from our parents. And unless we figure out a way to heal them, you know, we're kind of stuck with the residual effects of that.
I can get I can absolutely see what you're saying. I blame my dad for everything, by the way. And I always said, you know, I'll never. They push the right button, and out pops my father out of my mouth, and I'm like, oh, I swore I wasn't going to do that. 17 generations. Now, that's interesting, because I've heard some people say, well, you can only go back 7 generations, and you know, all of that. How was that to be able to heal that many generations backwards?
You know what felt really good about that? I don't have children, so I asked my friend who's doing the body code work with me, because she said you're healing it for future generations too. I asked her if it could apply to my nieces and nephews. And so she actually had to look it up, and she said yes, because you carry the same genes from one side of the family as those nieces and nephews. So what really made me feel good about that is thinking that I have in particular one niece who's very much like me, and that she won't have to carry this forever.
Oh, that is wonderful. So I had, just to relate the experience, I was in Peru last year, and they had us at the Condor Temple, which is the Condor Rock. And it's a rock that is naturally carved, and it looks, you look at it from a certain angle, it looks like the head of a condor. So we did this ritual, and we invited Pachamama up, Mother Earth up into us, the serpentine, and allowed it to come up. And they said, okay, so you invite Mother Earth up, and then you put your hands on this rock. I'm thinking, okay, put the hands on the rock. All of a sudden, I was weeping uncontrollably. Now, I cry once every 10 years, whether I need it or not. So for me to, I mean, I was gasping with the pain that in the sadness that I held. And I finally, after 2 to 3 minutes, which seemed like a lifetime, I just took my hands off, finally able to breathe. I turned around, and 2 people just grabbed me and hugged me. Thank goodness, from the group. And I couldn't take it in at that moment, but I was releasing generational sadness that I didn't realize was there, that would carry me, that I was carrying rather. And it was cathartic in such a way to free me. I realized I didn't have to carry that burden anymore. I didn't have to carry that sadness. And I never, after I looked at it, I remembered carrying it, but I didn't quite know what it was. It wasn't, because it wasn't just my grief. It was so many generations, so many people's grief all the way down
Right.
the line. So it was really interesting that that would happen. And I always hope that the generations that preceded me could be better in the afterlife, could be better in their next life, could be better, so that it resolves all the way down. Excuse me. So that it's an interesting concept. For those who are watching, whether you believe in reincarnation, afterlives, past lives, any of that, when you walk through a situation like that, you will understand. You will understand. Not that it happens. I never expected it to happen to me. And I had only kind of sort of glimpsed it. But when I had that physicality of it, it was amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And I liken it to, I've always like carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. That's just and I liken it to one little burden at a time, taking it out of that sack. And the sack is getting lighter and lighter as you unburden from all these things you weren't even aware that you were carrying.
Wow.
I remember one day, and it was actually in this room, and I can't remember what was going on. I don't think there was anything particular going on. And suddenly, I just gave the most enormous sob. Just one. And my reaction to that was, oh, thank you. Whatever that was, it was ready for it to go and it's gone. So, but I don't know about you with your working. I'm working with the energy. The number of times I felt myself crying when offering a Reiki session.
Oh, yes.
And it's just like, and it's okay, because we can help other people to release. They're releasing through us.
Yes.
But I wasn't actually giving a Reiki session. I was driving home. And every time I hear the siren, this one was an ambulance, pull over and let them go past. And it literally pulled into a drive just beyond where I'd stopped. And as I started driving off again and I went past the house, the tears came rolling down my cheeks. And it was just like, and I thought, well, okay, there's something going on in that house.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I'm being used to release some of that.
Yes.
But okay, but could there be another thought? And this is only sort of just coming to me with talking. Is thinking about, could there be something that the energies within me picked up that was going on in there that supported the release of something from me or my background or my past lives, etc. The truth of the matter is, when these things happen, we think we know what's happening. But is the stuff ours, or is it somebody else's?
Yeah. I think that's always hard to separate.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe releasing the energy matters, whether it's yours or somebody else's.
I love that. I love that. How has your writing changed over the last? You said you retired 5 years ago, and I'm sure you were writing all the way through, and I understand that. But you're now a quote unquote full-time writer.
Yes.
And so, how has your writing changed as you walked through this?
I think that I've become much more open and vulnerable in my writing. I was a lawyer for many years. I wrote a lot of technical stuff, and we were taught to keep our emotions out of it. Right. So when I first started writing, I went back to creative writing, not that I'd never done it before. It was very hard for me to let emotion in. I'm pretty good with the technicalities of writing, and I can draw a scene and, make you visualize something, but I was really not good at feelings. So I think that's the biggest change for me. And actually, I feel things more than I used to. I was so buttoned up that, there was no space for feeling in that world. So
your writing has really changed your perspective on your everyday life.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's marvelous. I find that, and I've written in a number of collaborations, and each piece is the next step for me.
Mm-hmm.
In working with Laura at Brave Healer,
Mm-hmm.
and also with Sara, it's that next piece is always, it's kind of what I need.
Yes, yes.
I write for me, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of just kind of blows up, so that other people can read it and find something within themselves that they can relate to, and that vulnerability, that emotions. When I first when I was 60, I've just turned 68, and when I was 60, I had very little connection between here to here.
Mm-hmm.
I was very, very analytical. I was very in my head. If it didn't make common sense, if it wasn't linear, I couldn't do it. And then I got into this world, the woo world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got into the world of understanding energy, and with energy is emotions, as emotions are energy in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I had all of these emotions coming through me, and I was shocked. How could really whoa, wait a minute. What? And all of a
Right.
sudden everything became non-linear. There was no
Mm-hmm.
ABC. It was here, 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 here
Mm-hmm.
in my life. And I came to be originally being confused, but then understanding and taking that in and allowing it to come in. And it was amazing how, as I let that in, all of a sudden how I saw the world changed, how
Yeah.
I perceived the world. Judgment became less and less and less.
Yeah.
And it was more about the purity of understanding, of love, of compassion, of seeing things through my heart rather than my eyes. And it really altered how I saw life, how I saw people, how I dealt with people. It was just absolutely amazing. And the writing just kind of made that even more prolific as far as expanding how I felt, how I saw things, my ability to express. I never used my throat to tell people how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
I told them what I thought,
Right.
but I didn't tell them how I felt. And so writing became that instrument that allowed me
Yeah.
to open my voice.
Yeah. That's very eloquent, and that's exactly how I feel. And the funny thing is, there's always more layers. I thought, I've written quite a few of these chapters, and I wrote my own little memoir, and I thought, I've told everybody, I'm an open book. I've told everybody everything about my life. And then I was reading, Salika Jawad has this new book out with 100 different writing prompts. And one of them was, what would you write if you were not afraid? And I thought, I don't have anything to write here because I've already told it all. But stream of consciousness started jotting down things. I came up with 15 things that I have never told anybody and never put in writing. So I'm slowly working on those, but there's always more. There's, we think we get to the bottom of things, and we're just infinite, so there's always more.
For me, it was, I suppose I got to the stage where I switched feelings off.
Mm-hmm.
The abandonment, the rejection, feeling unwanted, unloved, not good enough, unworthy, all of those negative things, I felt those about myself. So they were the only feelings that I had. But rather than going into anger, which is something I've realized I've got a massive deck full. Is that yours?
It's mine.
Lovely.
Not even in my room.
Bless. But although I've registered more recently that there is a pit of anger that absolutely requires dealing with. But I went into care. I care so much about other people. So rather than going into the anger and becoming bitter and sort of seeking attention by being naughty, it was trying to please with the hope of being seen and acknowledged.
Yeah.
And people can go either way. There'll be people who say there's a middle ground. Whether there is or not, I don't know. But I definitely went the people pleaser route. And yeah, I was manipulated as a baby.
Yeah.
And how many of us, to be perfectly honest, haven't been? But I know I've chucked this in before, but being a people pleaser, do we not also in our own way try to manipulate people because we try and second guess what will keep them happy rather than asking them what will make them happy?
I can identify with that, yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So one of the other subjects that we're doing is how we change, and I think we've kind of touched on. Is that the dogs also?
So the little dog
wants to come
in my room, and he's whining because the bigger dog is barking. So.
Gotcha. The joy of pets.
Yes. I told him he could come in the room as long as he was quiet, but
oh, he didn't read the fine print apparently.
No, he didn't do that.
And how we change it when we walk through life, how we've changed as we get older. The three of us are not 18 years old anymore. Although I submit that I am in my second 18th year, because at 68 it's 50 plus 18. So I'm living my best 18-year-old life. And I see the world so differently through the experiences that I've had. At 18 years old, however, I wanted to teach, I wanted to write, and I wanted to travel. And now I get to experience all those. Not as a poor student, but as somebody that can afford to at least a hotel,
right,
and not sleep in the car or in a youth hostel. So, which is quite an experience in and of itself. But what I want to ask is, how do you manage the change in your life as you walk through this, knowing that in the past you've been that pleaser, you've held positions of I don't want to necessarily say power, but of prestige in being a lawyer. And how has that kind of manifested itself in your life now?
So I was a law professor and academic dean at my law school. And even then, I was a people pleaser. So I spent all my time trying to make faculty, students, and the dean happy. And, that was my ideal world. If they were all happy, then everything was great. And it really has been through writing that I've, first of all, learned that that's a form of manipulation. I knew it didn't work, but I didn't realize it was manipulation. But also, I've let it go. I'm not saying I never try to please others anymore, but I have become much more direct. Like Sara said, I know how to ask for what I want or need. I'm a little bit better at saying no. And I'm not trying to be perfect anymore. And it is such a relief to walk through life not trying to be perfect.
Do you remember how to ask for help? And can you?
It's hard for me, but I can. Not always. And not always. So I can ask for help from healers and, people who are kind of outside my world who I think can help me.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to ask for help from the people who are close to me because I've always been the one who's helping everybody else. So it makes me feel really vulnerable to ask for help. And also makes me feel like, I'm not doing my job anymore as the one who takes care of everything.
Yeah, in my family, in my adult life, I was the caregiver. I ended up having to do all of the duties, especially as my wife got older and she became needed more and more support. And I didn't know how to accept help. Someone would say, "Hey, can I do this?" No, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
because it was an automatic response. But if somebody had asked me for help, I would always be the first one to be able to be there to give of myself. And I found that it was pretty selfish of me to not allow them to do those things for me, just the same as I would do for them. And it came as a realization, and what a difference it made in my life that somebody would come and give me 2 hours off from caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a relief because I had 24/7, and I didn't realize the tension that maintained within my body, within my emotions, within everything.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to give myself just that little bit of relief and being able to accept when somebody said, "Hey, let me take over for a couple hours."
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to do. And then, like you said, it's such a relief when you finally do it. And I think one of the turning points for me is I had a couple of friends who I hung out with, and they always poured out their troubles to me, at what was going wrong in their lives. And I always just listened and, gave support. And at one point, one of the friends took me aside and she said, we don't even know you because you never tell us what's going on in your life, So it was a real turning point because I never thought of it that way. I thought I was being kind and supportive. I was really being withholding. So, yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn, I think, when you've been that person, and I was that person in my family too. And even after I retired, my mother got sick and I was her caregiver, which I am very happy that I did, but it was expected because that was my role in the family. And I kind of realized something about me needed to change because if that's what I do for the rest of my life, there's no room for me. There's no room for me to grow. There's no room for me to, experience what this life is about.
Mm.
I remember because I never asked for help. I very rarely asked for help, but I never expected it. I really didn't. So in some respects, asking for it was, but I used to draw an angel card every day. I've stopped doing that. And I used to write them all down as well. I've still got that book somewhere. I wrote them all down, which I got. And I got the angel card one day about let yourself receive, which speaks to what you said, Scott, because within the written explanation of that was you get so much pleasure from giving to others, for being there for others. let others have that same pleasure of giving, of being there for you.
Yeah.
And with something else that had happened sort of in that period of time, it was just like, and I'm a great believer, if something comes at you 3 times, the universe is trying to get your attention. They don't usually have to make it 3 times with me these days. If it's something that happens a second time, I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? And it was just like, okay, I have got to be able to let myself receive. When you feel that unworthy, you're actually in that place of thinking, why would anybody want to do anything for me? And it's helping ourselves to grow beyond that. I'm not necessarily a great lover of the word change, because do we need to change? Or do we just need to grow beyond where we are? Because we are perfect in every moment for the life we've chosen to live. But that doesn't stop there being growth beyond that point. And I think when we think about the experiences we've all been through and everybody's shared in this book, we all eventually found the strength and the courage to start saying no. And that's a massive growth. It's not about changing, it's about growing, about having the strength and the courage to say, actually, no, that's not resonating with me. That's not for me. And it's uncomfortable saying no, especially when you've it really is. But it's about being true to you. And I know there are people who have different perspectives of the word selfish. But I will always stick with the dictionary definition, which is basically that true selfishness is only thinking about yourself and not worrying as to whether it's to the detriment of others, whether it can hurt them. And I'm talking about hurt here rather than them just not being happy that you won't do what they want. They're the ones being selfish. When they call you selfish, they're just projecting onto you of how they're being. And that's also something that as we've all gone through our journey, that healing journey, we've learned more about not just ourselves and how we are. And it isn't about judgment of others. It's about understanding potentially where others might be coming from.
And yeah, I agree with what Scott said earlier. You know, when you judge other people, usually it's because your harshest critic is for yourself. When you stop judging yourself, it's a lot easier to let go of judgment about others.
Yeah.
It is fascinating when you let go of that part of it. As we've grown, the world has expanded. Now, for those of you who were watching this, thank you for being here. But Sara hosts and has hosted hundreds of people of different modalities, nationalities too, but modalities, about how they deal with life, how they deal with healing, how they deal with expression, it is absolutely amazing. She has introduced me to modalities I didn't know existed, of things that, strange things that people do and they work for other people. I might not want to do them, but they work in their own lives. They work for themselves. They work for the clients that they use. When you take away judgment this is the way it's supposed to be because that's how I grew up and that's how things are supposed to be and that's how you're supposed to do things. When you allow that everybody makes their best decisions for themselves given their circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you'd live your same life if you grew up in South Korea or South Africa
Mm-hmm.
or Uzbekistan? How would your life be? You might be the same person that you are now. However, your life might look a little bit different. And so therefore, does that change who you are? Absolutely not. It just changes where you grew up. And I find that traveling opens your mind incredibly. I saw people in Bangkok over during Halloween, and they were burning money in the street. They were burning money
Mm-hmm.
as an offering to their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't understand it. And to the American way of life, I'm thinking, hell, I'm not burning my money. But in their society, that is what is expected. That is what is to honor their ancestors, to be able to do that. And does that mean they're wrong? Or does that mean I'm wrong because I don't burn money to honor my ancestors here? No, it is how we are brought up, how we were engaged, what tribe we're in, where we're born, and how we are conditioned to respond to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
How have you found, you have a wealth of knowledge, and you dealt with a lot of students too, by the way, as being a professor and being able to walk through that. How do you miss the teaching? Do you miss that give and take? And what do you do now that to do a very similar thing?
I absolutely miss teaching. It was the love of my life. It was the right career for me. And I'm still in touch with a lot of my students. I think the main reason that I teach memoir writing now is because I wanted to keep that going. And what's interesting is I actually have, in my new group I just started, 2 of my former law students are taking it. So it kind of feels like full circle, So I kind of forget the question, but I did want to talk about the travel thing.
Yep.
Because I believe in that too. I used to write a column called Travel and Transformation, because there is nothing that gets you out of your own head like being someplace you've never been before, where the culture's unfamiliar, and where, you're the visitor, you're the foreigner, and you have to pick up on the cues and kind of decide what's for you and what's not for you. And I just think that if everybody could have that experience of getting out of their own, we're in our own little boxes, get out of your own little box and get out into the world, you have a lot less judgment, because what you really see then, I think, to me at least, is like the mystery of life. And yes, I think there are some universal truths. Love, compassion, etc. I think are universal. But there's so many different ways of manifesting. And we get trapped into our own ways that we've learned that feel comfortable to us. So, that's why I love to travel. I love to go on retreats. I love to try new modalities, even if they're mysterious and I don't understand them. I think the lesson I learned about receiving actually came from an energy class I took, where we talked about giving and receiving being like yin and yang, and it's a reciprocal relationship, and you can't have one without the other. And you don't always want to be on one side of that reciprocal relationship. It's like you said, Scott, it's not fair to other people to, even if you're always on the giving end, it's not fair to other people to not let the relationship be reciprocal. So I think that, and writing can do that. That's also why I love to read. Okay, you talk about traveling to other cultures. I love time travel books because what you come to understand is how many of the issues that we face are universal. People have been dealing with them for centuries. And so how many of them are specific to this time, this place, this culture, and we're just kind of trapped in them. So yeah, getting out of your comfort zone and doing all of those things, even if you only do it in your imagination through books and movies, I think is a great kind of transformation.
I love it. You know, behind you is a picture of Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for years I saw different pictures of Buddha, and it didn't really mean a whole lot to me until I went to Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat in the presence of the Golden Buddha in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it's only this big.
Mm-hmm.
And they put different cloaks on for different holidays and the like. So this huge room and this tiny little Buddha, they're talking about the Golden Buddha, and everybody's like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, it's like going to the Mona Lisa where it's, you know, only about this big.
Right.
But I stood there transfixed. I didn't realize I was standing in front of it for 40 minutes while people waited for me in the back because of the energy of it.
Mm-hmm.
The energy, you walk in, there's always honor. You take off your shoes, you walk through, you walk in. And I was transfixed. I didn't realize that in the power of that tiny Buddha, there was the kind of energy that there was.
Yeah.
And I apologize. I looked at my watch and I realized I'd been over there for so long. And I walked out. I said, "I am so sorry. I didn't realize." They said, "You were gone. We weren't going to disturb you. You were kind of gone." But that's the difference between a picture. It's like going to the Alps, seeing a picture of a mountain. It's like, oh, it's another mountain. Okay.
Right.
But when I was in the Alps, they have a vibration. There is a feel to those mountains.
Mm-hmm.
As we were driving, as we're going around the corner, when we see a new vista, there is that sense of wonder. There is that sense of, wow. And a picture can't capture it.
No.
No matter how many pictures I've seen of the Alps, it never prepared me for what they felt like.
Yeah.
And the vibration that they brought that I could feel. And so the reason I add that was because I want everyone out there. Yes, a picture, movies, books, they're wonderful entertainment. Yes, they expand your knowledge. But until you're in Italy, in the presence of the David, and see it, and I've seen hundreds of pictures of that statue, until you feel and see that it's going to move, it is so lifelike. And how that came out of a pillar of marble is just absolutely amazing. And that is some of the wonders of life, is to being able to experience those things, to be able to fully understand why millions of people have seen that particular thing and come away with the same kind of awe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And Thailand, I saw the Golden Buddha too. And at the time I saw the Golden Buddha, there was a monk there giving out blessings, which they were flower petals, basically. And it was beautiful. It was very moving. I have a little video of it. But it wasn't just that golden Buddha. It was the whole experience of being in Thailand and seeing how outside of every home and business, there's a little altar or shrine. I mean, life is sacred there, and they're reverential about life. And I agree, Scott, it's really hard to understand that from a book or a movie. You know, being in the presence of that kind of energy was really amazing. It was life-changing for me. I always like to think that I see life as sacred, but in this country, it's hard. We don't have that kind of reverence. And being there really changed the way I felt about it.
Exactly.
See, that's what nature does to me.
Mm-hmm.
I organised, and it was a 3-week trip to the USA with a couple of folks with learning difficulties. And we spent a week with the Nez Perce in Idaho, learning about their culture, their history.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that was a wake-up call from watching all the cowboy and Indian films. It really was. I mean, because I grew up with those, and if it comes on the television, I can't be anywhere near it anymore. I really can't. But we got to Yellowstone Park, and we had a day out with one of the rangers, and we did see it was a single wolf, and we saw a coyote, and we saw the buffalo, and we saw the elk, but what he'd said to us, and we saw a snowshoe hare while we were over there. We saw so many different things, and the mountain goats that had disappeared from the park. We saw them that day.
Mm.
We saw a pine marten that day. That the BBC had a cameraman out there who'd been there waiting for this pine marten for 4 days, and it was going to be his last day.
Mm. And
we turned up at this place. We were ushered into the house, and the pine marten appeared within seconds of us arriving. And so we got to see this pine marten. But I'd said at the beginning, I'd love to see a mountain lion. And he said, have any of you played golf? And we just said no. And he said, well, your chances of seeing one of those are as good as you hitting a hole in one. Yeah. Right. The universe had other ideas. We saw a mountain lion.
Wow.
And his reaction to me was when we all we saw the brown bear, and we saw a grizzly with her 3 cubs, I think it was. I mean, what we witnessed that day. And he said, if you ever come back again, you will ask for me, won't you?
I believe you drew that all in. I believe that. Yes.
And it was, of course, absolutely, because I genuinely believe that it was amazing what we witnessed that day. But that's what nature does to me. Being able to have that year of being a trainee handler with the wolves at the UK Wolf Conservation Trust, and having the courage to go and do that, it's being that up close and personal with these animals, with nature, is phenomenal. It really is. And would I love to cuddle a polar bear? Yes, I would. Would it be very sensible? Probably not.
Probably not. Yes.
Trevor said to me, he said, do say goodbye before you go doing it, won't you? but when you see some of these stories about people who have supported a wild animal and supported them through something, sort of a danger and life-threatening thing they've gone through, and that animal remembers them.
For sure.
That, to me, yes, I believe in our Creator, and I believe, and I have felt so blessed in so many things, and that the nature thing is one of those for me. It really is. I suppose by honoring nature, I'm honoring life itself. And yeah, I mean, I was raised a Catholic, but I have moved away from all of that and what so many people refer to as being spiritual. Because there are so many different beliefs, but the most important belief is that we all come from love, regardless of what our beliefs and our actions are.
And it's funny you say that about Catholicism. I grew up Catholic too. And when I was a very young girl taking catechism classes, I just couldn't believe what they were telling me, that if a baby was not baptized, they were doomed to a life in limbo, to an afterlife in limbo. So, it just did, even from a logical point of view, it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, that's why I think, like you, Sarah, there are some universal truths, like we all come from love, but there's many, many roads to get there. And anybody who claims they have the one true path, I'm not interested in hearing about it.
When I was raised Protestant, I converted to Catholic as my daughters. I went every week, and my daughters were raised Catholic. My wife was Irish Catholic, and had a wonderful teacher. He was actually a history teacher who was a pastor, and so I got lessons that they never teach about in the Catholic Church, but about the Bible, about the times, and all of that, and I really enjoyed it. And what I found is that I'm an accidental Buddhist. When I went to Southeast Asia, I realized that I was really closest to their theology, their ideology, their understanding that God is here. God is love. God is within. In the West, we're always told, oh, he's out there. God is out there. And he's out there. He's the big judge. He's sitting on the big throne. Okay. So it never seemed quite right to me. But now I understand in this journey that we're on of enlightenment, if you will, of better understanding, of higher understanding, that everything comes from within. And what I'm finding is that if love is the strongest anything that we can find, if love is the strongest and it comes from us in here, then that therein is where God lies. Yes. However we categorize curiosity, compassion, and understanding, and all the other things in that list of things that come out, but they all seem to come from here.
We all have the God gene within us.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add to what we've talked about today, Laurie?
That just felt like a good note to end on. So I don't think I have anything else to
say. I agree, actually. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fabulous conversation. Scott, as always, thank you so very much. It's been brilliant. Next week, I'm being joined by Kate Hawkes. The power of your personal magic to manage stress and anxiety. I hope you'll think about joining us for that. In the meantime, folks, take care, be safe, stay well. Namaste, sweet souls. See you soon. Thank you.